Hello everyone and welcome back to Beatley Tone's Beatles channel. Lovely to have you here. Thanks for joining me for this video and I hope you're all doing well out there. So welcome to part 2 of When Beatley Tone Met Macca. I'm going to tell you about a couple of occasions where I managed to grab a few seconds with Paul McCartney and tell you what happened. I'm also going to tell you about a very near miss. Now, if you haven't seen the first video, you might want to go and watch it because I'll probably be referring to it a couple of times in this video. And if you haven't seen it, you won't know what I'm talking about. So if you do want to watch it, there's a link down in the description, or if you don't want to go to that now, at the end of this video, there'll be an end card and you can just click on that to watch part 1. Right, have you got a cup of tea? You got a beer? Your feet up on the sofa? Right, I'll begin. So you remember in the previous video when I met him in 2005 at Waterstones, you remember I asked him the question about the 2005 US tour. Well, in 2006, he put out a DVD of that tour. It was called The Space Within Us, and he was doing a signing of these DVDs down at the Virgin Megastore in Oxford Street. Now, this wasn't a wristband event. You just went on the day, which if I remember rightly was a Sunday morning, and you just queued up and they would let however many they were letting in. So by now I'm a bit of a veteran of this whole getting your stuff signed and meeting that Paul McCartney bloke. So I just thought, well, what I'll do is I'll just follow exactly the same formula as I'd done the year before and I'd be absolutely fine. I completely failed. So I totally underestimated the draw of a signed DVD over a signed children's book, and there were a lot of people there when I arrived at 4 o'clock in the morning, and again it was in December and again it was freezing. I don't know how many people they were letting in to the signing, but when they let those people in, there were probably about 20 or 30 people ahead of me in the queue still. But we were told not to go home because if Paul got through those people within the allocated time and he still had time left in the store, then he would see, you know, the next lot of people in the queue. When they first started letting people in, it was about 11 o'clock. It wasn't like the Waterstones thing where we were only queuing till 9 o'clock when they opened the doors. This was different. You know, Paul McCartney, he don't get up at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. So I think they started letting people in about 11. Paul probably rocked up at about 12. He was going to be in the store for an hour and a half. So it was at least 1:30 before they started letting some other people there. So, you know, I'd been there since 4 o'clock in the morning. So that's like 9.5 hours I've been there. They did let some of the people who were in the next batch of people in, but I wasn't one of them. And by the time those people had gone in, I was probably only about 6 or 7 people from the front of the queue, but I just didn't get in. And by now we were queuing right at the front of the store. So we saw Paul leave in his Merc and give everyone a little wave, and I went bye. And that was a complete fail. And I was so fed up. I was so fed up that I'd been there since 4 o'clock in the morning that, in the words of Flaming Pie, I cut my nose off to spite my face, and I didn't even bother going into the store to buy the DVD. You know, I was cold, I was tired, I probably wanted a wee. I just went home. So fortunately, Mrs. Beatley Tone bought me the DVD for that Christmas, so I did get it in the end. But that was the story of a fail. That isn't the near miss that I was going to tell you about. The near miss is much more exciting than that, but I just wanted to sort of get it across that just because you go for these queues, you don't always get in. So here we go again. So 2 years later, 2008, again, it's in December. There, Paul is doing a signing at HMV Records in Oxford Street, and he's signing the Fireman album, Electric Arguments. Now, this was a wristband event, so we had to go down there on the Thursday. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole story of the queue like I did in the first one, because it's pretty much the same story. But because this was a CD signing, it was deemed important enough for them. I was going to say they sent a film crew down, but they didn't. It was just like one person with a camera, and they were filming for the London news programme London Tonight, and they were just filming the queue. And I'm not sure why they were filming the queue. They probably just wanted some footage of a load of idiots sleeping on the pavement in the freezing cold on a cold December morning. Now, because it was a CD signing, I'd kind of learnt my lesson from the failed attempt for the DVD. So I felt that the CD was going up a rung from a DVD, and I thought there would be even more people there. So this time I got down there 2 o'clock in the morning, and honestly, it was horrible. It was really cold, but I did get a wristband, and here it is. So that was the wristband for the HMV event. You can see there that the actual signing was the 21st of December, which I think was the Sunday before Christmas that year. And this wristband is not nearly as nice as the one for the Waterstones one. That is a nice looking wristband with Paul's signature on it. This one looks like it's made out of that stuff that they make raincoats out of, and it just says the Fireman at HMV. But I did get in, so I went along on the Sunday, and you know, whenever it was that they opened the doors to let us in, again it was the same old business. It was no photography. By then I would have had a smartphone with a camera on it, but oh no. They roped off an area for all the people that were waiting for Paul to sign their CD. They roped it off, so we all stood there, but there were other people still allowed in the store that could see, like, from a distance. And some of the people that were in the queue waiting to see Paul were asking these other people if they would take a photo of them when they went up to get their signed CD from Paul. But I didn't do that because, you know, anyone that hands their phone to a randomer in London is taking a risk. I can tell you. So I didn't do that. Now, as you know, if you've watched the first video, you know when I met him the first time, I had something planned to say, and I don't know why I didn't this time, but I just didn't. So when it was my turn to go up and meet him, I was still nervous, but I wasn't as nervous as I was the first time. And as I said, I didn't have anything planned to say to him, and just hoped something would crop up as we spoke. He stood up, you know, offered his hand again. We shook hands. He asked my name, and I gave him the CD to sign. And this time I remembered to ask him to sign it to Tony. So this is the CD. It comes in this really nice slip case, and here's the Electric Arguments album. He signed it to Tony. Cheers, Paul McCartney 08. It was 2008. So I got my CD signed, and he put it to my name. So that was great. And as he handed me back my signed CD, he kicked off the conversation, which was just as well, because, as I say, I didn't have anything planned, and even if I had something planned, I probably wouldn't have had any time to say it. And what he asked me was, did I have to wait long to get the wristband? And so I said, yeah, I was probably there for about 7 or 8 hours. And he said, was it cold? And I said, absolutely freezing. You always seem to do these in December, which was kind of my way of letting him know that I'd actually done this before. To be honest, I was quite surprised that he even knew that we had to come and queue up for a wristband, but obviously he did, and he said, well, thank you for coming and your dedication. And that kind of threw me a little bit. And you know how in the first video I said I really wanted to make sure that I didn't say anything stupid or sycophantic, and I'm not sure if this was a little bit sycophantic, but it was the first thing that came into my head. And I said, no, thank you for doing this, because it means so much to us fans, and we know that you don't really have to do it. And he said, actually, I really enjoy doing this and coming out and saying hi to everyone. It's always a lot of fun. So that kind of surprised me. And then he said, and I do understand. I said, thanks very much, Paul, and off I went. And as I walked away, I was kind of thinking about when he said, I do understand. And what I'm guessing that he meant by that was that he did understand that it meant so much to us as fans. And I was thinking, well, how can he? How can he understand? How can he understand what it's like for the likes of me and you to meet someone who's been a hero for like so many years? And then I thought back to when the Beatles met Elvis and how in awe of him they all were. So he does kind of know what it's like to stand before greatness. And also, I was kind of thinking when he, you know, about this whole understanding thing, I was thinking about the first generation Beatles fan at the Waterstones signing, who just burst into tears the minute she got in front of his desk, and he was very concerned for her, and he gave her a cuddle and he gave her his handkerchief and just generally made her feel as comfortable as she could possibly feel. And I think that's what he does. I think that's what he does, and I think that's what it says a lot about him as a bloke. I think that he wants you to be comfortable when you're speaking to him, because also if you are too in awe of him, that's quite uncomfortable for him. So he wants you to be comfortable, and I think that says a lot about him as a bloke and about the humility that he's got. And that's really all I'm going to say about this particular meeting. Now, I did look online to see if there were any photos of this event, and there was only a couple, but one that I found, I'm actually in it. So here it is. Here's the sort of long shot, and here's a close-up. Obviously that photo was taken once we'd been let into the store and we were in the queue waiting to see Paul. So that was the HMV Electric Argument signing event. So me and Mrs. Beatley Tone, we like an occasional weekend away in Europe, and sometimes the destination of where we go is determined by if there's a Paul McCartney concert in that city. So we've seen him in Paris and we've seen him in Stockholm, and in 2013 we went and saw him in Verona in Italy, which is the story I'm going to tell you about now. In 2013, Paul was promoting the new album. Out There was the name of the tour that he was doing. So where the gig was in Verona was this beautiful amphitheatre, Roman amphitheatre, and it was in the middle of the city, and our hotel was just like round the corner from it. So when we went to Verona, we were there for a couple of days before the gig, and then we left the day after the gig. Now, the amphitheatre, which unquestionably is the most fantastic venue I've ever seen him at. It was just absolutely beautiful. You could just walk into it during the day. You could just walk into it and have a little nose round, and it was free. So, you know, because there was nothing really to see in there. It was just an amphitheatre. You went in there, it was just a load of stone steps in a kind of circle, and that was it. You'd go in and you were done in 10 minutes. So we would go out for the day, and on our way back to the hotel, we would pop into the amphitheatre and we would be seeing how they were getting on building the set and the stage and everything. They'd already started before we'd even got there. So it takes a few days to build a set for a Paul McCartney gig. So the night before the gig, me and Mrs. Beatley Tone went out for dinner. Now, Mrs. Beatley, she likes a bit of posh nosh. She likes these restaurants where the dishes are like a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of the other, and all these ingredients that no one's ever heard of except her. And whereas when I'm in Italy, I'm happy to go out and have a pizza or some pasta or something. So she'd found this restaurant, been recommended on TripAdvisor or whatever, and it was highly regarded, and she wanted to go there. So we went along to this restaurant. I looked at the menu. I didn't fancy it at all. It was too fiddly. It was much too fiddly for me. And I didn't want to go. I was like, can't we just go for a pizza? And she said, no, it's highly recommended. We should really get going here. So anyway, I gave in and we went in there. Anyway, so we sit down, we start having our meal. We had the starter. As we get the main course, a door opens on the side of the restaurant. I'm not sure where they'd come from, but in walks Paul's band. So, yeah. So Abe walks in first, then Brian Ray, then Rusty Anderson, and then Wicks, and they sit down, and they've got some ladies with them. I think probably their wives or girlfriends or whatever, and they sit down at the table. And I almost did a double take when I saw them walk in. I couldn't really believe it. They were sat at a table they were sat at like a longish table, sort of opposite our table. So, I'm saying, Mrs. B, I was really excited about the fact that they were here in the restaurant, and was Paul going to turn up as well? I couldn't really not speak to them, so I went up to Abe Laboro Jr. Because I just thought he always seems like a really nice, jolly sort of bloke. I thought he was probably the most approachable, and I said, look, I don't want to interrupt your meal or anything, but when you finish, we've come over from England for the gig tomorrow, would it be okay if we had some pictures with the band? And Abe sort of looks down the table and says, is it alright if these people have some pictures with the band? He didn't say it in a Cockney accent because he's American. Would it be alright for these people to have a photo with the band? He doesn't even speak like that. Why did I do it like that? I don't know. But anyway, they all said, yeah, no problem, no problem, no problem. So I go back to our table, and by now we've almost finished our main course, and they haven't really started theirs yet. So we ordered a couple of bottles of wine, and by the time they'd finished their meal, we were quite pissed. Anyway, so I went over, and they all stood up, came out from behind their table and that, and we were having a chat, and Wicks asked us where we was from, and I distinctly remember Brian Ray introducing himself saying, hi, I'm Brian Ray, as you would if your name was Brian Ray. And we had a little chat. They were asking us if we'd seen the band before, and I said, yeah, we've been to like a lot of concerts, and they were asking us where we'd seen them. And obviously I asked them the big question, was Paul coming to the restaurant? And sadly they said no, he wasn't. Paul was in New York with Nancy, and they were flying in tomorrow just for the gig. So Paul wasn't going to be here, which was very much a shame. So I asked them what Paul was like to work for, and they were all really complimentary about it. I mean, come on, they're not going to start slagging off the boss, are they? They're definitely not going to start slagging off the boss. But they were all really lovely and really interested in us. And I think that I'm not going to be so bold as to say I think they appreciated us asking for photos, but I think that they recognised the fact that it was probably only hardcore fans that would recognise them as being Paul's band, because although they've all had really great careers in music, they're not really famous in their own right, I suppose. So they're kind of known because they're in Paul's band. So we went away from the restaurant very happy, and it was kind of a bit fluky that we went in there, because if I'd had my way, we would have been having a pizza somewhere. So that was the story of meeting Paul's band. It was a really close thing, but sadly, no Paul. So on the afternoon of the gig, we'd kind of seen all there was to see really in Verona. We were getting excited about the gig, and we thought we'd go and wait by the stage door for Paul and the band to arrive. So we found the stage door, which was easy to find because there was barriers up for where people were going to line up to greet them, and we waited for a while. Eventually the band turned up and we grabbed some pictures of them. There's Abe, and there's Rusty Anderson and Brian Ray, and there's Wicks. Wicks spotted us, and he waved at us as he obviously recognised us from the night before, and they went into the venue. And we waited and we waited and we waited. Eventually Paul and Nancy turned up in their black Mercedes, and by this time I think that we'd been waiting in the baking sun for probably about 3 hours. He was late. He was definitely late because all his staff were on the phone, and you know, you can imagine the where are you sort of thing. He had to turn up because you know, they do these days, they do a sound check in public. You know, that you can buy VIP tickets for his concerts and get in to watch the sound check. So you know, they were expecting him quite a long time before. They got out. Now Paul was on the opposite side to the barriers where we were, and so Nancy got out on our side. If Paul had been sitting on the other side of the car, then we might have been able to grab a word with him, but he was over the other side, and got a few pictures. You know, he did the usual thing, waving to the crowd and doing the V's and all the rest of it. And that was it, really. We didn't manage to get a word with him, but we'd waited about 3 hours to see him for about, must have been knocking on for almost a minute. So that really was my very near miss. Didn't manage to see Paul in the restaurant or have a word with him when we were really close to him when he arrived in the car, but it doesn't matter. It was great consolation meeting the band, and you know, it was something that I'd never done before. Waited at a stage door, so you know, it was fun. It doesn't matter. And here's a few pictures of the gig just for good measure. So my most recent meeting with Paul happened in September 2019. So I'll tell you what happened because it's pretty unbelievable. We've got some friends that live in France near Toulouse, and we were going over to see them. Normally we would fly to Toulouse, but this time we decided to take the Eurostar to Paris and then get a French train down to Toulouse. So on the way back home, we got to Paris and got to the Eurostar station, the Gare du Nord, and waiting on the concourse by some doors that when the train came in, the doors would open and all the people that were getting on the train would go down to the platform and get the train. Anyway, Mrs. Beatley Tone went to get some food or went to the loo or something. Anyway, left me on my own with the bags. Anyway, so I'm standing there leaning against the wall and I'm on my phone, and I don't know what I'm looking at. I'm looking at Twitter or I'm looking at Facebook or whatever. And I looked up from my phone, and there, standing right opposite me, right by the doors, was Paul and Stella McCartney. Just standing there like normal people. Normal people waiting for a train. Not only waiting for a train, but waiting for the same train that I'm getting on. I kind of did a double take. I couldn't believe that they were there. Anyway, so I had to go over to him, and I offered my hand, and he shook my hand, and he said, "Bonjour, monsieur." And I said, "No, it's okay. I'm English." And he said, "Oh, okay. You're all right, mate." "You're all right, mate." He said, "Are you all right, mate?" Honestly. And I said, "Nice to see you again, Paul." And he said, "Have we met before?" And I said, "Yeah, I've been to a couple of signings that you've done in London." And he said, "Ah, so you're the one." I was in such shock of actually just literally bumping into Paul McCartney that obviously I didn't have a question or anything prepared to say, and I didn't have the comfort of there being a product that he was signing that I could talk about. So I just said there were other people waiting to speak to him, so I just said, have a good trip back, Paul, and he said, you too, and off I went. And I went back to my little place on the wall, and I just took a few pictures of them while they were talking to other people and just waiting for the train. And obviously they were getting on the train, the same train that we were getting on, but obviously they were going in first class. They were taken down to the train before anyone else. Obviously it wouldn't have really been appropriate for me to ask Paul what he was doing in Paris, but if you are wondering why he was in Paris, I found out later the reason he was there was to accompany Stella to Paris Fashion Week. Of course, this situation of just bumping into him at the station is a completely different situation to the other times that I've met Paul. So although I was a fan approaching him, all the other people probably weren't. You know, they were just normal French people that obviously knew who he was because he was a famous person, but they might not have necessarily been fans. So it was a little bit different that time. You know, there's just two unbelievably lucky things that had happened there. Firstly, the fact that we decided to go on the train. When we would normally have taken a plane, if we hadn't have done that, it wouldn't have happened. And the fact that I was just standing right by the doors that he was standing by, and you know, he was just there. It just goes to show that you don't necessarily have to go to a signing or a concert or something like that to meet a Beatle. It can just happen to anyone at any time in any place just by fluke. I was very, very lucky indeed that happened. So that's all my meetings with Paul. I know that they're not, you know, they're not earth-shattering discussions with him, or, you know, they're just very small little snippets of conversation, but they all mean something to me personally, and I'm absolutely delighted that they all happened. So I hope you've enjoyed my little stories about meeting Macca, and if you're seeing this channel for the first time and you like what you see, please consider subscribing, hit the notification bell and giving the video a like. That would be absolutely marvellous, really easy to do. All you've got to do is hit that little red button over here somewhere, or at the end there's a little circle with the channel logo in it. You can just click that as well to subscribe. If you do want to go back and watch the first part of this video, there'll be an end card just coming up shortly. Now, my next video is going to be a topical one because, as you all know, Paul is out on tour at the moment with his Got Back tour. So I'm going to be ranking his live albums from worst to best. I think that's something that's been overlooked on YouTube. I've not seen any videos of anyone ranking his live albums, so I'm going to do it. So I hope you'll join me for that. Thank you for joining me for this one, and I will see you all very soon. Ta-da.